In the spring of 1997, a note was found stuffed into the mouth of an 11-year-old boy. It was signed with a name nobody recognized. Police had no leads, no motive, no suspect. And when they finally caught the person responsible, the entire country went silent. Because nobody expected the answer they got. The killer wasn't a hardened criminal. He wasn't even old enough to legally watch most of the movies airing in theaters that year. He was 14. Before we get into what happened, if stories like this pull you in, tap like and subscribe now. Because what this case did to Japan's legal system still matters today. And I don't want you to miss where this goes. Let's set the scene. Kobe, Japan, early 1997. On the surface, this was an ordinary suburban community. The kind of place where kids walked to school and neighbors knew each other. But starting in February that year, something was quietly unraveling beneath that calm. 2 young students were attacked near an apartment complex. Then, in March, a 10-year-old girl was struck from behind with a hammer. Just minutes later, and barely 200 meters away, another girl was stabbed. She survived, but the attacker vanished without being identified. 4 incidents. No arrests. No pattern the public could see yet. Just a rising sense that something was deeply wrong in this town, and nobody could name it.
Then came the moment that turned local unease into national horror. On May 27, 1997, a school caretaker arrived at Tomogaoka Junior High to find something at the front gate that would haunt Japan for years. The severed head of 11-year-old Jun Hasei placed deliberately on display with a handwritten note wedged into the mouth. The note was signed with a name the killer had invented for himself, Sakakibara Seito.
This wasn't just a murder anymore. This was theater. Someone wanted to be seen. And here's the detail that made investigators' blood run cold. This wasn't a random act of violence carried out in a panic. The killer had gone back to the scene the day after killing Hasi, brought tools with him, and deliberately staged the discovery for maximum shock. Police weren't just hunting a murderer. They were dealing with someone who understood exactly how to generate fear on a massive scale, and who seemed to be enjoying it. Newspapers began receiving letters from the self-proclaimed Sakakibara Seito, taunting police, threatening to kill again, describing his victims in dehumanizing language. Handwriting analysis on those letters would eventually become one of the biggest breaks in the case. But before that happened, an entire nation was gripped by a question with no answer. Who does this, and why? The break came about a month later. On June 28, 1997, police brought in a teenage boy for voluntary questioning after matching his handwriting to the letters. At first, he denied everything. Then, according to reporting on the case, he broke down and confessed, not just to killing Haas, but to the earlier hammer attack and the other assaults police hadn't even connected yet. He was 14 years old. That single fact detonated across Japan. This wasn't a story about a monster hiding in the shadows for years. This was a middle schooler, someone who sat in classrooms, ate lunch with other students, walked home the same streets as his victims. And that's when the second wave of shock hit the country, because Japanese law had almost nothing prepared for a case like this. Under Japan's juvenile law at the time, offenders under 16 could not be tried and sentenced as adults, no matter what they had done. This boy, publicly known only as Boy A to protect his identity as a minor, could not face the death penalty that his crimes would have almost certainly carried had he been an adult. Instead, he was sent to a juvenile medical reformatory, not a prison. Now, put yourself in Japan in 1997 for a second. A country already unsettled by scattered youth violence throughout the decade suddenly had its worst fears validated in the most extreme way imaginable. And the legal system's response, protecting a killer from adult consequences because of his age, didn't feel like justice to a lot of people. It felt like a loophole. This is where the story shifts from true crime into something bigger, a national reckoning. Politicians, parents, and legal scholars began asking whether Japan's juvenile protections, originally designed to give troubled kids a path to rehabilitation, were now shielding people capable of premeditated, ritualistic violence. The debate that followed didn't stay contained to newspaper opinion pages. It reshaped actual legislation, contributing to a series of amendments to Japan's Juvenile Act in the years after, gradually lowering the age at which serious offenders could face harsher prosecution. But here's the part of this story that even people who remember the case often don't know. In 2004, 7 years after his arrest, Boy A was released from the reformatory. He was given a new identity to reintegrate into society, a legal and quiet process meant to give him a second chance most people felt he didn't deserve. For years, his real identity stayed protected, a legal shield most Japanese citizens accepted as part of how their justice system worked.
Then, in 2015, that shield cracked. A tabloid magazine published his real name, his current location, and even a photograph from his teenage years, defying the very privacy laws designed to protect him. Their justification was that it had become, in their words, a matter of public concern. The backlash was immediate, and it came from every direction. From people who felt the exposure was overdue, and from others who felt it violated the entire principle the juvenile system was built on.
What made this moment so complicated wasn't just anger at one killer. It was a country forced to ask itself an uncomfortable question it still hasn't fully answered. Does rehabilitation genuinely work for someone capable of this level of violence at such a young age? Or does protecting his identity simply protect the system from admitting it failed?
That tension between believing children deserve a path back and knowing some acts feel unforgivable, regardless of age, is still playing out in Japan's courts today. Every time a shocking case involving a young offender makes headlines, this case gets referenced again. It became the reference point, the moment everything changed. If you want to understand how Japan's legal system actually evolved after this case, and what happened the next time a young offender pushed the country to its limit, that's a story worth telling next. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And if this kept you watching until the end, a like genuinely helps this channel grow.
Because sometimes the most disturbing part of a case isn't the crime itself. It's what it forces an entire society to admit about the system meant to prevent it.